Hello everybody, this is Richie coming to you with another deck check video. This time it's Momir Basic, which is basically a Vanguard variant of Magic you can play online. The Vanguard card you're playing should be Momir in most cases, as well as 60 other cards, so that are the basic foundations of this format. Momir Basic is a format which is really sensitive on how you build your deck and balance your threats and answers, which you will absolutely need in high-class tournament play. And because the card choices are so extremely important, I will first show you my version and my build of this deck, and then I will take you through some games so you can experience with me how each card plays its role in the big picture, which is Momir Basic. So let's start out with our by far weakest card choice. This is Momir. He's a member of the Simic Guild in Ravnica, which is, by the way, one of the weaker ones, if you ask me. We run him because there seems some kind of bug in the game with Magic Online that only allows me to run him here. As most of you know, my primary choice would be Rakdos, but until this bug is fixed, I guess we're stuck with old Momir here. He basically has one weak ability where he puts some dudes into play if you pay mana and discard a card. You see, that is not quite what my understanding of card advantage is, but as I said, until we get Rakdos working, we just have to roll with him, so whatever. Also, your starting life total is increased by 4 life points, which is kind of mediocre since I didn't encounter any burn decks in this format yet. But if we ever meet a burn deck here, we can take 2 more lightning bolts, which is okay, I guess. Okay, so the first card I decided to put in the deck is Plains. This card serves really good to activate Momir's ability. By having a lot of lands in your starting hand, you gain advantage of being able to activate Momir like very early in the game. The next one is a slightly different planes. This one not as much for activating Momir himself, but for activating the creature's abilities spawned by Momir. You have to keep in mind that you are going to summon you sometimes summon creatures that have abilities, and therefore you need mana for them too. So you have to differentiate a little bit what each of your basic lands should do. You will notice that the next planes, this one is from M15, so it's the newer one with the new card frame I really like. I recommend you playing this in the early game, so this would be a perfect first turn drop. So your opponent thinks you are a noob and only having basic lands of the newest set, and then you can outconquer them by playing really nice Magic. The next Plains has a rather old artwork. It serves well to tap for white mana, which is essential in the colored circle. You will notice that there is a great synergy with Momir here by tapping the land for mana and spending the mana prior produced to get a token creature into play, and that is kind of how you win the game. You tap the mana and make a creature. The next card we got is a Plains. I have chosen this one because I believe that the mana this Plains produces is far more superior than other Plains I run in this deck, so this is really superior white Plains mana, which is really good to use. Okay, the next card choice was really hard because while playtesting, I noticed that I was rather low on white mana sources. I never drew any them really, so after trying out Tundras and Sacred Foundries, I noticed that only a Plains card could fit in there like no other, and besides, I think there is another bug where the program won't allow me to submit Tundras or Sacred Foundries. So this has to be fixed too. Still a lot of bugs here. The second to last card is the Plains. This taps for one white mana, which is extremely important in this deck's concept. Um, yeah, and this Plains turned out to be not very good in tapping for mana, so I would recommend you to only use this to discard it while activating Momir. Uh, Please note that having a planes for discarding purposes only will not hurt its feelings, because it is just a lifeless card, or in this case, lifeless bunch of pixels. We now move on to the next big area, and also the win condition of this deck, which is a little bit more control oriented, and it serves some kind of long-term game plan you will have in this deck. So we start off with this basic island. You may notice this beautiful artwork. You might not notice it at first, but this is actually a combo piece in this deck. What this does is that if you have this island out with our next card, this island here, and the combo goes like this. If you put out this island and put this island into this one, there is a slight chance that your next top deck will be another island, so they kind of reproduce, so to say. But in almost every case, I pulled off the combo where I put this one into that one. Uh, I top decked another basic land, so that helped me really advance my board. And if you're a little bit of land screwed in this deck, I would recommend you to use this combo early in the game. Um, Luckily, we run out of these islands and have a lot of the other ones. This one is played in the deck because sometimes it is required to have blue mana for whatever reasons. Now for the next choice, there is a great, if not obvious, reason we run this. This comes in case that you tap all your lands for mana and try to activate Momir. And then you realized, oh man, I really screwed up. I don't have any cards to discard, so I tapped all my lands and have nothing in my hand. And therefore, after the old rules, you would get mana burn. And from this island, the mana burn you will receive is a slightly less painful one. So just have this, and you don't have to suffer that much of pain. The next card, this one here, shows its true power when you got it in your opening hand. Playing this on turn 1 or 2 will most certainly guarantee you to be able to activate Momir at a reasonable time. So this basically helps you to gain the early board advantage to advance the game plan really early on in the game. Okay, this next island here is played in the deck not for its game value, but you can basically tap it for blue mana. But to be honest with you, my fiance bought me this for my birthday, and I didn't want to disappoint her, so I just put it into my deck and we just run with it. Next up, we have this island. This suits perfectly to tap for blue mana and activate the abilities of, in most cases, blue creatures. The last one in this bunch is this island here, which is basically an exact copy of the previous one. We like to run 2 copies of them in our decks because it shows that when you have more cards of the same time, of the same type in your deck, then it showed more consistency in your draws. So we absolutely have to go with this island. Okay, so for the next line, we come to our black-oriented gameplay. You'll realize that we run way more swamps and mountains than any other cards in here, because we love Rakdos and accept him as our only lord and savior. Okay, whatever. First, we have this swamp. Swamp is crucial in this deck, enabling black mana, which is relevant to feed Momir Vic. That's this guy here, in case you forgot. When you are really out of options, you can also use this card to discard it for Momir, so your chances of getting a creature will rise when you discard this certain card. For the next card, there is a special story behind this choice. I noticed while tapping this and using its black mana for Momir that you always will get a black creature. This only occurs with this single copy, so please don't confuse it with any of the other black mana sources in this deck. So remember, use this for the black mana and you will always get your black removal heavy creatures. The next one is a swamp, which tends to behave really strange since it gets discarded almost every time. Well, to be honest, I think it isn't really a swamp, but maybe some sort of a double agent plains to be honest with you. Uh, Now I notice when you look at this artwork, you'll notice this small white circle here. It looks a little bit like a white mana symbol. So we may be safe to assume that this is a plains, really. So we put this over here. And with this demonstration, you see that by putting this swamp over here, we can mutate the deck just in the way we need it, and this white portion of the deck will get a little bit stronger. So it's always we can always switch between its strengths and weaknesses, and this is one absolutely one of the best things you have in Momir Basic. The same concept is true for the next swamp we have. You notice that underneath the thing that looks like the white mana symbol is this water, and this indicates that this isn't really a swamp, but rather an island. So we can put this over there, and now we can see how versatile this deck really is, and really how easily you can just adjust this for your needs in certain special matchups. You might know from your local game store guru that creatures which die to Doomblade are bad. They are considered not playable, so everything that doesn't have Shroud or Hexproof just dies to Doomblade, and of course is non-black. So therefore, we put a swamp in our deck, so that if it ever occurs that we top deck our Doomblade in this deck to kill almost every creature ever printed, then we have the black mana source for it. Still in the testing phase here, but hopefully someday I will top deck my Doomblade when I really, really need it. Okay, to be honest with you, to worship Rakdos is not the only reason why we run so many swamps in this deck, but because black creatures tend to have nice removers stuck on them as creature abilities. Now with this swamp I noticed that this removal is far more nastier and the crying of your opponents feels much more sweeter, so this is a sort of an auto-include here. The next choice is a swamp, which is special in his own kind of way because it produces the blackest, most cruel mana I have ever seen in my entire life. So this is really the most malice mana there is. As you might know, I have been to a lot of Grand Prix in the last couple of years here in Europe to seek out similar swamps, and I was really, really lucky to get the whole playset. So you got 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you won't imagine, but nicely Wizards of the Coast granted me an unredeemed, so I got these really blackest swamps in Modo now. So yay! Okay, then we have a swamp. This is a basic land swamp and therefore is affected by everything that affects either basic lands or swamps in particular. Note that this is immune to any effects that affects only non-basic lands such as a Blood Moon Wood, probably, or any effects that affect plains, islands, mountains, or forests. Okay, so next up is a swamp. If you turn this card sideways, or in this case click it, you add a black mana into your mana pool. Although beware, if you have too much black mana in your mana pool, it might hurt your skin while swimming in it. This swamp here is included for paying echo costs. As you can get all kinds of creatures with Momia, some of them will require you to pay echo costs. To really show the creatures that you love them, the swamp's mana tastes a little bit like chocolate, so the creatures will more likely to stay with you and fight by your side. To be honest, I'm kind of a noob with the next card. I don't really get the next card choice. It is a swamp, as you can see, and really, to be honest, I didn't build this deck by myself, but I net decked it from the internet. I guess he put it in the deck because it plays well with the other cards, but I did not draw it yet in my test games, so only time will tell if this makes the cut on the long term. So maybe in the next few matches I'm going to show you. Maybe this swamp card will do some work, but maybe it won't. I really don't know. Yeah. Okay, now to the powerhouse. I guess this next card was banned a long time because of its meta-breaking abilities. There was a daily event I saw with a live stream where a player managed to lay down a Blightsteel Colossus by discarding this card, and he instantly won the game next turn with it by dealing 10 infect damage to the opponent, because the opponent had a Llanowar Elves out, so he didn't get quite 11 damage, but 10, but it was quite enough to win him the game. And then there was a big discussion. Maybe we should ban this swamp, maybe it won't. So now it's unbanned, and we have the opportunity to play this extremely powerhouse. Yeah, the next card is a swamp. And as you might know, black is a very deceptive color. So with this one, your opponent might also think that could be maybe a secret agent planes. But when you tap this for black mana, yes, then your opponent won't know what hit them. So this is kind of the double-edged sword. So okay, I show you the swamp card with the white symbol on it, and you expect me to add white to my mana pool, but I can't because it clearly says swamp. So take this. Okay, we come now to the end of our black route, so to say. The second to last swamp is also a very flavorful one. As I told you, black is a very sneaky and deceptive color. And when you look at this artwork in the background, you might notice some mountains. So in this case, your opponent might think that you might follow a red path. So black is like more like your splash color to win, because as you know, most people don't read what the card does. They just look at the artwork and say, okay, there are some mountains painted on this, so this has to be a mountain. They don't even take the time to read the card's name. And just imagine how stunned they will be when they realize that you add a black mana instead of a red, which they were expecting to activate Momir. It can cause your opponent to instantly tilt and win you the game without even thinking. Alright, so the last one here is a swamp. You might get scared when you look at it, and instead of an ability, where normally the card's abilities are printed, you see this menacing skull, which is really frightening, but don't be afraid. This skull only stands for the death and suffering you are going to bring over your opponent, so be confident in yourself. Alright, so now we take a look at the other half of our Rakdos worshipping cards. First off, we got this mountain. As you can see, this has a very beautiful artwork, which kind of serves as the poster boy for this deck. Few of you might know that Momir really stands for Mountain Miracles. So this was printed on the event deck. This mountain was printed on the Momir event deck when they sold it in paper. That was really good times. Okay. Next up, we got the opposite. This is a very ugly looking mountain. Apologies to the artist, but I really don't like it. Therefore, we don't want to lay this on the table along with our other absolutely perfect looking cards, but we'll rather discard it with Momir's ability to have it rot in the graveyard. The next one is again a very beautiful mountain. In fact, it is so pretty that I never give it out of my hand. So this one will stay in our hand for the whole duration of the game. We won't pay any mana or activate it for any mana, nor are we going to discard it. So yeah, we'll just have it in our hands and look at it and be joyful, I guess. Okay, next up we got a mountain. Mountain extremely important in this deck. As you might have noticed, we run plains, islands, and swamps. If there's a little bit of time left at the end of this video, I might talk about the forests as well, but I'm not quite sure if we make it in time. So this is basically for having red mana available to the most of the time. You can use this for red mana. Next up is a mountain coming from M15. This is the same kind of deception you got from the plains. So your opponent will think you are a new player that's just started playing and purchased your account last week like I did. Alright, the sole purpose of our next card is to be discarded, because with this mountain we got a nice dragon every time we discarded this. This might have something to do with the upcoming set Dragons of Tarkir. but I'm not quite sure if this is some kind of promotion Wizards is running right now, so we just have to wait and look what surprises Wizards have up their sleeves. Next up is also a new mountain, but the reason this is here is not as obvious as you might think at first glance, because there is a approximately 50-50% of a chance that you will either play this and tap it for mana, or you will just discard it. So I cannot. It's really board depending, and it really depends on your game plan, how you want to run your deck, what strategy you want to follow. Yes, and the next mountain I like to call the Cannon Fodder Mountain. Well, not Cannon for the Mountain, but the Cannon Fodder Mountain. It discards very well, so when you throw this away in your discard pile or graveyard, as it's called now, you absolutely look like a poker superstar which is folding, and this helps to intimidate your opponents because they think you're not only a master of Momir by having such a thought-out deck, but also a great poker player, so you can really have some nice moves here. The next one might look like an ugly mountain at first, but in the old Rakdos fashion, well, you know how Rakdos really is, it serves a second purpose. Now, if you take a closer look at this card, you will notice that the mountains printed here are all kind of spiky, so you can show your opponents the aggressive nature of yours and your deck by just having mountains on the table which look very threatening and spiky all the way. Alright, then the next one is a copy of the previous one. The reason behind this is that if your opponent has, for example, 2 creatures out, you can do this nice, cool, trendy swap of of creatures and lands. So you have the lands closer to your opponent, like the cool kids do nowadays, and the opponent's creatures might get scared of the mountains. So you put the spiky mountains exactly in front of the opponent's creatures, and they will say, "Oh, I don't want to attack this nice chicken because I don't want to get myself hurt with spiky mountains." So this is a nice way to have this trendy kid swap of thing going out for you. Okay, the next mountain reminds me of Arcbound Ravager in my Affinity deck. You might be familiar with it. If you are not, check out my Affinity deck check video. While the possibilities of this card seem limited at first, you will quickly notice in your playtesting that you have a lot of options with this one. You see, you always have to look at the board still and think, what are my options? What are my possibilities? What cards could my opponent have? Sorry, I just had to have a sip of my water here. My throat is getting sore. Yeah, so you have to think, what kind of cards could my opponent have? What kinds of options do I have? Do I want to play this tap it for mana? Do I want to discard this card? There are really questions over questions, but if you practice enough, you will be really able to master this card. Now, the next card we have is Mountain, and that is because Magic Online couldn't provide us with any more beautiful mountains, so we have to use this. Okay, we are now moving to the next card, which happens to be a mountain. I would absolutely recommend playing this one and only this one on your first turn. So try not to confuse it with any other of the genius card choices we have. Only this one, yeah. The reason I like this so much is because you see there is a fog painted on the artwork, and therefore you could fool your opponent into thinking that we maybe have a lot of fog effects and in our deck, so he won't even bother attacking you with his puny creatures. The next card is one I didn't want to include in the first place because the version I net decked from the internet played another one. But after like 10 hours of playtesting, I realized that this mountain fits way better in my deck than the other choice, which I think also was a mountain. So we are going to stick with this one here, and I will show you how good it really is in the games that will follow. Next up, we got a mountain. It is a basic land. At first glance, it looks like it does not have any abilities, but the red mana symbol printed there means that you can play this or lay it on the table, and if you tap it, which means you turn the card sideways, you add one red mana to your imaginary mana pool, which serves this deck well in combination with Momir Basic and creature-based abilities that happen to cost maybe red mana. Okay. The next card is also very important. By discarding this mountain with your Momir, then you get a nice and fuzzy feeling, which is really, really nice for once in a while to have this comfy feeling in a Magic tournament. This card, which happens to be a mountain, is kind of a subpar choice, to be honest. It does a mediocre job in this deck, but is not as extremely powerful as our next card choice. Uh, I wanted to play more of the next card I'm going to talk about, but it made the deck too powerful, and I'm really, really afraid Wizards is going to ban this deck. So I just settled with this. Really, as I said, despite the fact that the next card is so overpowered. So this is a mountain. It taps for red mana. What did you think it does? Stupid. Okay, alright. Before we get to our last area of cards, I have to tell you some really valuable background information. So this is the info you only get on Bantam Berserker and nowhere else on the interwebs. When I first ran this deck, when I first tested with this and played with it with our play group with our friends, it had plains, islands, swamps, and mountains. But as the time passed by, I noticed that this deck was lacking something. And it was not until last week when I saw a pro player at the Grand Prix on Twitch stream who really had green mana sources. He looked really cool. I really can't remember what his name was, but he just slammed this crazy looking forest, and I thought to myself, "Wow, I this is what this deck needs. This is the last missing puzzle piece." So I quickly went on Twitter and Facebook and asked the people what this card was, and they told me it's called Forest. So I ran it to my local game store the same day, and if you wouldn't believe me, they only charged me 10 euros per piece. So my deck is absolutely competitive now, but it was a really great experience. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here are the card choices sorted by converted mana cost, so that you can write your own deck list. Alright, first we got a forest. You notice that this is almost as beautiful as the poster boy mountain I have showed you before. I choose to run this forest because after I have angered the magic gods by ignoring a fifth of the color pie, I wanted to show my respect by playing beautiful looking forests. Next up is this forest. It serves two purposes in this deck. There is an option that you play it like a land and tap it for green mana, or in combination with Momir, which is also some sort of a combo in this deck, you can discard this to create a creature token of random choice. The next card is rather special. I consider this to be a promo forest or the promo card in this deck. Every deck needs one pimped out card. And there is a story, or I don't know if it's just an urban legend or a myth, you might have heard it somewhere in your local game store, that when you have 60 cards in your deck, or 75 with your sideboard counting, and only one of them is foil, you can get into serious trouble in sanctioned tournament play. Because there are people apparently who have the ability to tell the foil card apart from the non-foil ones. So, to be honest, this is my cheaty forest. This is my cheaty foil forest. You might say to yourself now, "Hey, Richie, this forest isn't even foil." Well, yeah, that's unfortunately true. I had to stay on a budget and couldn't afford a foil one, but in my mind, this is foil, so the cheaty part still works. But just don't tell anyone. The next one is quite similar to my cheaty forest, but is it's in to fool the judges when it comes to deck check, since this forest is not foil in my mind, and the judges can't tell them apart, so my cheating won't be noticed by anyone and nobody can prove it. Ha! So this one is a forest and it somehow slipped into my deck. I initially wanted 7 forests in my deck, but I realized you can't have a Momir Basic deck with only 60 cards, so I right-clicked on the forest and clicked add one to the deck. So I got this one and was finally able to submit my deck. Sadly, with this card, I cannot tell you much about this. It is a forest, and I never pulled it from my deck before. Maybe the 10 hour of playtesting prior to this video wasn't quite enough. Maybe the games I will show you afterwards will feature this card, so we can explore its strengths and weaknesses together. There will be a playlist, so you can watch out for this forest and maybe we find some really game-breaking combos. The next card serves a very similar purpose to our spiky mountains, because you will realize that this here looks like a face sticking out of the tree when you look at the artwork, with its tongue sticking out. So the message we send to opponents is, I don't care about your creatures, I'm the far superior magic player. And you see how this deck works. This is really Rakdos style. The last card is a forest as well. We didn't want green to feel discriminated in this pack of cards, so we upgraded it to be on par with plains and islands, not of course with mountains and swamps, because Rakdos is far superior and will eat your soul. Now, of course, we have the problem that you as a viewer and my potential future Momir Basic opponent now know exactly what the purpose of every card is. I talked about this deck, I talked about the synergies, the mechanics, so I'm going just to be evil like Rakdos and shuffle this here up a little bit just to confuse you and that you lose track of the order of these cards so you won't know which of them is which. So, ha! Okay, so after this little deception, we're going to take the long-awaited look at the sideboard. And when building the sideboard, you really want to keep in mind that you want to have your deck as flexible as possible to be adept to every game situation there is. Maybe you need more cards to tap for mana. Maybe you need more cards to discard. Therefore, we have 3 islands, 3 plains, 3 swamps, 3 mountains, 3 forests. So there you go. This one taps for blue, this one taps for white, this one taps for black, this one for red, and this one for green. You should know that you are a magic player after all, aren't you? So, I hope I could give you a good in-depth look in this highly complex deck. If you like, you can take a look at the playlist and watch me play some games with this. If you're eager for some more high-end strategies, please like and subscribe. Bok bok!